Okay, better late than never. We have the patch 15.10 notes. We can see that they're nerfing Fiddlesticks, Kane, Lulu, Naafiri, Xin Zhao, Yuumi, and they're buffing Cho'Gath, Senna, Smolder, adjusting Vi, and they're going to be making sweeping changes to the AP items, mostly buffs, as well as changing Unsealed Spellbook. So let's get into this. Let's see. So obviously, Brawl has been released as a casual game mode. This is actually what got me stuck, because I swear I was trying to make a patch notes video earlier, but when I saw what they were doing with the Southeast Asian server, it reminded me of these, different player base counts and things like that, and how having a larger player base in one region can obviously cause that region to be more competitive, similar to how if a high school has 10,000 kids, their, top 10 football players or whatever are going to be so good compared to a school that only has 1,000 kids, that their 10th best player is going to be as good as the first best player from that other smaller school. So that when you're dealing with different school sizes like that, different populations, you get a higher tier of player coming out at the top. And it's the same thing with league servers. When you have millions and millions of people playing in Korea and EU and many less players playing in NA, it's one of the reasons why you see the region not stack up as well. There are other reasons why as well, but at the end of the day, one of the main reasons is that the more players there are competing for those spots, the better the players are that actually end up getting them. So that's really important to understand. So it looks like they combined a couple of servers. I won't really pretend to know exactly what's going on with the Southeast Asian servers. I did take a look, and it looks like Vietnam and Taiwan are still their own server. So I assumed that this was a lot of little minor servers in the region, like probably Singapore, Hong Kong, Macau. And so I don't know exactly what happened there, but basically they said that when they merged these servers together, some of the players from servers with a smaller population, where you would say it would be less competitive, had a very difficult time climbing in ranked. And so it had such a negative impact on their ranked climb that they're adjusting LP gains for the Singapore players, which, again, I don't know the details. If there was a genuine issue that was with the way that they merged the servers together and they weren't gaining the amount of LP they were supposed to, that could be one thing. But if they're just trying to mitigate the effects of, one smaller server having a smaller player base and just being worse than the other servers they merged into, I don't know that they should be giving them free LP in order to compensate or better LP gains. That seems really, really anti-competitive, and kind of the antithesis of what ranked is all about. So, this, without knowing a whole lot about what's going on here, this paragraph really concerned me, and then set me off on all those other videos, of course, about the, server population sizes and things like that, and the decline that's been going on with those. Okay, so we have Cho'Gath up first. Cho'Gath is currently performing too well in mid, as he has been for a while, but needs some help in top lane. So they're going to increase his level 1 attack speed. They're going to take a tiny amount of damage off of his Q, from 80 to 320 to 80 to 300. So at first, first point, it's not even going to matter, and then it ramps up 5, 10, 15, 20. Even with 20 damage off of his Q at level 9, I don't think that that's that big of a damage reduction. And the attack speed that he's getting level 1 is really nice. And then his E damage is, let's see here, going from plus 2.5 to 3.5% of target's maximum HP to 2.5 to 3.9. So this is getting buffed as well. So what's interesting here is, honestly, I don't really see, it's not like people are building AP on mid Cho'Gath, right? They're building kind of this tank movement speed build. So the problem that I have with this is I don't see how this is going to negatively impact mid lane Cho'Gath. And instead, I kind of read this as just a buff in general. Mid lane Cho'Gath, especially this tank movement speed build, relies on attack speed and using E just as much as it relies on using Q. Q is also one of Cho'Gath's hardest abilities, frankly, one of the hardest abilities in the game in general to hit anyways. So a lot of times, frankly, you're missing it anyways. And 20 damage off only by the time that you get to rank, 5 and the ability level 9. If you're even maxing it, actually, I don't know that you always max Q. I think that you can max E sometimes too, although I don't know what they do on mid Cho'Gath. But that doesn't seem like that big of a nerf, and it doesn't seem like it's only targeted at helping top lane. Do I think that maybe level 1 attack speed and E, help top lane Cho'Gath a little bit more than mid Cho'Gath, and mid Cho'Gath focuses on Q a little bit more? Sure, but this is just going to buff both, right? It's just going to make them stronger in both. And when you're trying to take a champion out of mid lane or something like that, doing these changes that might actually end up making the champion stronger seem really strange to me. Kayn health growth is going down by 6 per level. Kayn's been doing pretty well, so like this is a fine change. Lulu armor growth decreased, R cooldown increased. So yeah, Lulu's been doing really well, and we have the benefit of hindsight because I'm late to the patch notes. So I would tell you, and this is actually what I said in my original recording a long time ago, this one, is that Lulu shouldn't really be relying on her armor growth at all, right? Lulu's a champion that in her best fights is not getting touched at all, sitting in the back line, being able to get off heals and shields, and polymorphing anyone who ever comes into range anywhere near her or her teammates. So she doesn't really, a good Lulu player especially, doesn't really need a whole lot of armor growth. And when we're just talking about knocking off 0.3 armor per level, it's not really going to make a big difference on the amount of damage she's taking. And since she's not a tank and not utilizing this stat very much anyways and trying not to utilize it, it's such a random thing to try to hit that it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. And then for the ult, this is another interesting one because it's a pretty big increase to the cooldown of her ult. It goes up by 20 seconds, then by 10 seconds, then it's back to the same. But on support, as we've talked about before, you're often sitting on your rank 1 ult for a huge portion of the game. And then a very small portion of the game, maybe not even in some games, you get a second point in your ult at level 11. And so this is a pretty significant cooldown increase, you would think. The problem is that for one thing, you actually have a bunch of ability haste. And so when you add 20 seconds on, given that you have a certain amount of cooldown reduction or something like that, all of a sudden this becomes like 12 seconds instead of 20 seconds because you already have like 40% cooldown reduction or something. And what that ends up doing is vastly mitigating the nerf to the cooldown. On top of that, you don't necessarily spam Lulu ult every time it's off of cooldown. You have to wait for someone to get really low, to be dying, for a team fight or, an engage opportunity with it. You're just not spamming Lulu ult off of cooldown. And so because it's not an ability that you're spamming off of cooldown, if you're waiting and having to hold it for an extra 10 seconds or so anyways, it's probably not going to make a huge difference in a lot of scenarios. So between the ability haste actually cutting what you read these nerfs to cooldown as in nearly in half, and then the fact that Lulu's probably holding this anyways for an extra 10 or 20 seconds every time it's up for an actual opportune time to use it, it just doesn't affect the outcome in a lot of games. So you have a champion that they've been nerfing for multiple patches in a row that seems incredibly strong and is even, I would argue, high elo skewed, because she is a little bit difficult, especially after the HP nerfs, to pilot through lane and through team fights against assassins unless you're good at positioning and stuff like that. So Lulu has been overperforming in higher ranks and, just doing all right in lower ranks. And these kind of nerfs that are very easily mitigated by playing the champion properly anyways seem really, really unintuitive to me. So they're not targeting the things that are making Lulu strong, which is massive amount of healing and shielding and how strong her polymorph is. Now they have targeted those things in the past, like they reduced the cooldown of her W, and they may have hit her healing and shielding, but Obviously Lulu is still performing really well, and with the hindsight that we have now, we can see that on this current patch, so this is after these nerfs, same patch, nearly a week into this patch now, Lulu's still sitting at a 51.4% win rate in Emerald Plus, with a nearly 10% pick rate and 20% ban rate. So clearly the champion is doing really, really well, despite these nerfs that they've thrown at her. So obviously they haven't been super effective. I'd like to see, again, hit her health early so she has a really hard time in lane. You could hit her starting HP. I think that was really effective. You could reduce her E shielding, or increase the cooldown on her polymorph, or decrease her ult healing, right? These are the things that are making Lulu strong, and she's been able to take so many nerfs, so many patches in a row to other parts of her kit, that at a certain point you have to start targeting what's fundamentally, even if it risks going overboard a little bit and nerfing the champion a little bit too much, you need to target what's actually making the champion strong, instead of random little nerfs in hopes that you take the win rate down by a tiny percentage, one patch at a time. Okay, Fiddlesticks Q fear duration decreased and damage adjusted, W damage increased. So Fiddlesticks is a pretty niche pick. It says support Fiddlesticks is becoming more popular than jungle Fiddle, which we're okay with, except for the fact that he's clearly more powerful as a support. Okay, interesting. So this was mostly support nerfs. Fiddle's kind of a niche pick, but he is very, very strong. And the people that tend to play him tend to be one tricks. So the champion does perform very well. I'm not necessarily sure that Fiddle needed nerfs, but we can go back to the last patch and look, I guess. Yeah, no, I can see it was definitely overperforming in support. I only played against it like one game or so on that patch, and I didn't think it was that good. And it's always been strong in jungle, but again, that's because it's kind of had a low pick rate in jungle of one tricks who are quite proficient at the champion, performing quite well with it. So let's see, Q Terrify, fear duration 1.25 to 2.25 to 1.2 to 2. So they're taking some duration off of the fear. And then the damage is going from 5 to 9% of target's current health to 4 to 6%. So that's pretty significant. But it's going from 2% per 100 AP to 3% per 100 AP. So this is obviously to try to kind of help with jungle Fiddlesticks not getting hit as much by this nerf, because if you have a certain amount of AP, you're going to have a break-even point where you're a little bit stronger. For example, if you were at this 9% mark, once you had 100 AP, or let's see, you are only getting 1% more than before. So you'd have to get, 300 AP to do the same as before. So this is also a nerf to Fiddlesticks jungle as well, because the damage is going down until you have quite a massive amount of ability power. Empowered damage is going from 10 to 18% to 8 to 12%, and 4% per 100 AP to 6% per 100 AP of target's current health. So yeah, that's a pretty significant nerf, I would say, to his damage. And W Bountiful Harvest is going from 60 to 180 damage per second to 60 to 180, but a 35% AP ratio to 40%. Not a very big increase to AP ratio, but maybe that'll help, Fiddlesticks jungle deal with these nerfs a little bit. It's fine, though, like we talked about, that they hit Fiddlesticks jungle, since he's been performing pretty well as well. I think this was a smart change, right? Like, you hit Fiddlesticks jungle and support, but you obviously hit support harder. Naafiri, passive monster damage reduced. So I'm kind of curious to take a look at what's going on with Naafiri right now, because when I see these changes in jungle, I have a hard time with these changes specifically, looking at the numbers and telling exactly what the impact is going to be on their clear speed. Obviously not a jungler, so it's kind of harder for me to tell. But oftentimes you'll see, they want to throw a champion into jungle or something for the first time, and they'll just slap on like 150% or 200%, monster damage multiplier. And it seems absurd to me. So when I see like, okay, 20% is coming off, to me that sounds low for these monster damage multiplier numbers for jungle. But again, I don't know, and it really depends on the individual champion how much it slows down their clear speed. So it looks like Naafiri has fallen pretty hard, down to just under a 50% win rate in jungle. Still getting banned quite a lot though. And what about in mid? Obviously this change shouldn't have affected mid, so she's still performing quite well in mid. Okay. Looking to bring down Naafiri jungle just a bit more this patch. It's interesting that they chose to leave mid untouched. Oh, this is last patch numbers we're looking at still, my bad. Okay, what's happened here? So Naafiri should be even further behind in jungle then. Okay, so maybe that was a little bit heavy-handed. But I guess they're reacting to the ban rate being so high. Obviously, people don't like playing against this champion. Okay, so she actually seems to be doing pretty bad in mid and in jungle. I guess mission accomplished. I don't know why her win rate in mid went from 52% to 48%. Maybe just the changes to the AP items that come later in this patch. That's kind of crazy. Interesting though. But that's good that they've gotten a hold of Naafiri, and I think that people are still over banning the champion. You know, I would never ban a champion with a 1% pick rate and a 48% win rate 28% of the time. That's crazy. So I think people, you know, have been used to banning this champion for so many patches in a row. They're just needing to adjust to that. And we saw the ban rate go down, you know, from nearly 40% to on the last patch we can see it was like 40% down to 20%. So they are adjusting. Okay, so we got Senna. So they're bringing AD Senna back. Passive crit chance and soul drop increased, Q heal decreased. So they're basically saying that Senna's AD builds underperform compared to her enchanter setups. So the crit chance per 20 stacks is going from 8% to 10%, and the soul drop rate on minion or monster kills, so if you're killing the minions yourself, is going from 8.4% to 14%. I think that this is quite significant, and that this could bring AD carry Senna back, but, you know, we'll see what people do. It's definitely something that people are not used to playing. I guess we could tell now, right, since we're looking in hindsight, are people starting to pick Senna again in AD carry? Yeah, it looks like they are, and I'd expect a bit of a learning curve because it's been a while since people have been playing it AD, and obviously with a lot of people jumping on it, you know, a lot of these people are maybe not even familiar with the champion in the first place, but this is actually all right. So she's sitting at 48.5%. I think if they leave that alone, you know, you could see AD Senna kind of stabilize at a higher win rate after a patch or two and people get comfortable on the champion again. And then her Q, the heal is being reduced by a 10% AP ratio. So the base is staying the same, the AD ratio is staying the same, but the AP ratio is going from 60% to 50%. So that shouldn't be that big of a deal. I don't really think that support Senna gets a ton of AP, and obviously you're not building AP outside of like Enchanter Senna. I guess the idea here, like they said in the paragraph, was to help bring the Enchanter support build down a little bit and buff the AD Senna support build so that they're more comparable with each other. Now, I don't know that a 10% AP ratio reduction, so you'd lose 10 healing if you had 100 ability power, which is even 100 ability power is quite a lot for Enchanter Senna support. So I don't know that that's going to make almost any difference, but you never know. And then Smolder, Q damage / burn and E damage per stack increased. So he gets 0.3 damage per stack that he has. His Q does an extra 0.3 damage. Now that's going up to 0.4. Sorry, I'm sick, by the way. I've been sick for so long, it's actually crazy. Q burn damage per 100 stacks, 0.4% to 0.5%. So he's seeing an increase there as well on the burn damage. And then his E hit damage per stack is going from 0.1 to 0.12. So not, you know, super significant, But you have to keep in mind, obviously, Smolder can get a ton of stacks. So when you get 200 stacks, having an extra zero point 0.1 damage would be, you're doing 10% of that in extra damage. So let me think about this real quick, make sure I'm right on the math here. So if you're getting an extra 0.1 damage. So if you had 200 stacks, you're getting an extra 20 damage. It's not bad. It could definitely help. It's not nothing, right? These numbers sound really small, but it's not nothing. So yeah, and I think this is fine. Smolder has been, I think, really underperforming and struggling. Since obviously he's one of these champions that's kind of hard to balance properly. Either he's like Giga OP or he's not really doing very well at picked ever. And I feel like every time people are picking Smolder right now, it just feels troll. It feels like we can't win the game. He doesn't have the same kind of scaling that he used to where he hits a power spike and wins the game. It's, so it's just underwhelming and kind of useless in lane, and then doesn't have that huge power spike he used to once he gets his stacks. Now, eventually he does get stronger, right? The way that it works now is rather than hitting that threshold and becoming just a crazy, unbeatable champion, he hits that threshold and then he continues to scale stronger and stronger. So you need to be able to stall out for even more time. But if you do go really late game on Smolder, he is still quite a strong champion in that super late game. But he feels so useless in lane. So I think, seeing some buffs here, even if they're just going to help him later on, right, be more useful, that trade-off between being useful in lane or being useless in lane, but then being stronger later, at least it makes that trade-off a little bit more worth it. Vi, Q minimum damage decreased, max damage increased, R mana cost reduced, damage decreased. Yeah, so when I first saw these changes, I thought that there were a lot of problems with it. So we'll take a look at what's going on with Vi now, but they took her minimum damage. So the way that this works is when you start using Vi Q, you can wait a long time and charge the Q up all the way so that you can go further and do more damage. The reality is, though, is that a good Vi player, especially in high elo, where I think the champion is more prevalent, frankly, anyways, a good player on Vi is going to charge their Q as much as they need to so that they can get in range and hit the person and CC them with it as fast as possible. So good Vi players in high elo are almost always going for quick Qs, not fully charged max Qs. Because of that, losing a little bit of damage targeted at like these, these like charged up Qs doesn't really do a whole lot. So we can see that the minimum damage went from 45 to 145 to 40 to 120. So early it's, losing a little bit and then more and more and more until it loses 25 damage. And then it's going from 80% bonus AD to 60%. Well, this is on the minimum damage, so I suppose this would be on a short charge Q as well. And then maximum damage 90 to 290 to 100 to 300. So you do get actually a little bit more of an incentive to charge it up, I guess, all the way. And then 160% bonus AD to 150%. Excuse me. And, so one of the things that people were pointing out, though, is that when you're clearing the jungle, you are able to charge your Q up all the way to full. And because you're able to charge your Q all the way up to full when you're clearing the jungle, this actually isn't impacting her clear speed at all, which is one of the other main determinants of how well a champion can do, at certain ranks and things like that. And so because her clear speed is actually not really being affected much by this, it's not really that big of a deal. Cooldown refund when canceled is now more responsive, so that's just quality of life. Fixed a bug where E would crit for 100% total AD instead of the intended 75% total AD. Not a big deal. I don't think that people are building crit on Vi. R cease and desist. Mana cost is going down to 100 at all ranks from 100 to 150. That's just nice. and then the damage on her ult is going down from 150 to 400 to 150 to 350. So, you know, a little bit of damage off, none at rank 1, 25 at rank 2, and, you know, 50 at rank 3. And then the bonus AD ratio is staying the same. So all in all, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. She's basically just losing a little bit of damage on her Q if she's doing these short Qs. So I'd like to see how Vi is doing as a result. Let's see here. So she's dropped quite significantly, actually. So that surprises me a little bit. I think, again, because the quick Qs did get reduced, that could be what's having such a big impact on her, the damage there. But that's kind of surprising to me. I mean, this is a pretty significant decline. What happened to her win rate from before? Wow. Yeah, so she was sitting at just above 50%. And this dropped her all the way down to, you know, just below 48%. So a full 2% decline because of those changes. That really surprises me. I wouldn't have expected such a large decline off of that. Let's see how it's doing at like other ranks. Yeah, it's not doing well. And before? Yeah, I guess that damage made a huge difference. And, you know, like we said too, I guess those quick Qs made all the difference in the damage that she was doing. I can't imagine that just this little bit of damage off of her Q. I mean, I guess you have 20% bonus AD ratio coming off. That's pretty problematic for it. So that ends up being like quite a bit of damage, actually. Yeah, that's a significant damage nerf because, I mean, if you're, again, I don't know what ability she maxes first, we could check, but if you're maxing Q first and you're losing, you know, 25 damage plus 20 damage per 100 AD that you have, I mean, you're losing a huge amount of damage with 200 bonus AD or 100 bonus AD. Like, you're losing like 45, 65 damage a Q. I mean, that's insane, right? That's kind of a huge damage decrease. Usually we're seeing, you know, 5, 10, maybe 20 max. So to take like, you know, 40, 60 damage off of a Q is pretty rough. So I could see that now. But yeah, I wouldn't have expected that to have such a major impact. That's really crazy. They might have to buff her now, actually. She went down so hard. But maybe people don't want to play against it. We'll see. Armor growth, Xin Zhao 5 to 4.4. Yeah, Xin Zhao's been doing really well. Seen it all over the place. Armor growth is not Y, though. So I'm curious to see if this had any sort of effect. So Xin Zhao was sitting at like a 51%. 8th most picked jungler, doing pretty decently. Nothing crazy, though. No one's banning him. Like, he seems like a very fair champion to play against. Were people playing him in mid lane or anything? No. I know that may sound weird, but there are people who played him in mid lane. Let's take a look here at Emerald Plus 2, since we're on that. It's about the same. And then we go to this patch. So I wouldn't have expected this, but he's way down. I wouldn't have expected this to have too much of an impact. Yeah, kind of interesting. So his win rate went down, but his pick rate has actually gone up and his ban rate has gone up significantly. So that's kind of interesting because if we look here, you know, going back to the previous patch, his win rate was 51%. Oh, no, his pick rate's gone down and his ban rate stayed the same. Oh, yeah, I'm kind of surprised that this would have such a significant impact on his win rate as well. This is another one that I think is a bit shocking to me. You know, he is a champion that utilizes his armor growth quite a lot, and unlike a Lulu, and he's getting 0.6 taken off of it every level, whereas Lulu was losing 0.3. So that's obviously double that nerf. And then on top of that, he's getting more levels in general since he's in jungle instead of a duo lane like a support would be. So I can see this being a lot more armor. But yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that it had this big of an impact on his win rate, like over a full percentage point. but I think he's landed in right about where they want him to. You know, just slightly below a 50% win rate, kind of disincentivize him in the meta, but he's probably still playable for the people who care about him. And, you know, his pick rate's gone down accordingly, and seems like his ban rate's staying about the same, though, but he was never really that heavily of a ban champion. I think people have always felt like Xin Zhao was a pretty fine, fair champion to play against. Okay, and then Yuumi, our heal decreased 35 to 65 to 30 to 50. This is a change I really disagree with, just straight up. Because if we take a look at Yuumi, we got to address the elephant in the room, right? Nobody likes Yuumi. That's the reality. Everybody hates Yuumi. She's one of the most annoying champions in the game. Her champion design is fundamentally flawed and broken because an enchanter is supposed to have a huge amount of power and utility that they provide to their team through their massive amount of healing. But the weakness of the class is that they are extremely vulnerable to just getting killed, picked, dove, etc. That's the vulnerability, the weakness of the class. Now, Yuumi, fundamentally as a champion, ruins that balance that exists with those champions, where Sona can get one shot, you know, very easily. It's hard for her to go ward and all this stuff because she's so squishy and vulnerable on her own. So she has to be very careful with her positioning. Any enchanter has to be very careful with their positioning, etc. So a player who positions really well, has really good threat assessment and stuff like that, and can keep themselves alive, can do incredibly well on enchanters. However, most players are not able to do that, and as a result, you know, they suffer and falter sometimes to the vulnerabilities that enchanters have, and it makes the game feel playable. Problem with Yuumi in her design is that she takes that counterplay against an enchanter away by saying you have to kill her teammates first, otherwise she will just be untargetable. And so unless the Yuumi makes an absolutely boneheaded mistake of jumping out of one of her allies and getting CC'd in the middle of a fight, she just can't be touched and gets to basically be invulnerable and use all of her healing and shielding and abilities with ease. And this is a fundamentally broken design for an enchanter. And because of that, you have to take her power level way, way down to compensate. She has to heal, she has to shield, she has to do less damage, way less than any other enchanter in the game because of how invulnerable she is and how she takes away that fundamental counterplay. Otherwise, she's just extremely giga broken. She's also one of the most annoying champions to play against because where's the counterplay and what do you do against that? On top of that, when they were working on originally gutting the champion and trying to change her a little bit, one of the things that they did is they actually took away one of her main vulnerabilities, which was that in lane, she could jump out of her ally and auto attack to, I forget exactly what the benefit was, but I think she got like mana and then gave a shield to her AD carry. Whereas now she gives the heal to her AD carry, or it was a heal, I think. She gives the heal now through her Q, hitting her Q. So Yuumi before had this mini game where she was incentivized to actually leave her AD carry for a little bit, for a second or two in lane, creating a window where she was vulnerable, at least in lane, for you to jump on her and CC her before she could go back to her AD carry. But they took that mini game out, or she could choose to, of course, just not do that ever, but then she wouldn't get access to her passive for most of lane. So because they took that mini game out, they made her even safer. She doesn't need to exit in lane and risk getting CC'd in order to get her passive. She can just get it by hitting Q. So they made her even more safe fundamentally. So that's just crazy. So you have to have a very low tolerance for this champion ever getting anywhere near being good, because when the champion's good, it's extremely difficult to deal with. It's broken and there's no counterplay, and that's just a fundamental problem with the champion's design. So I understand why Riot wants to over-nerf the champion, don't get me wrong, and I understand that we hate Yuumi and don't want to play against it. But let's be honest, if we go back and look at this patch, Yuumi was sitting at a 48.7% win rate, and she was not getting picked that often. If we go to all ranks or whatever and take a look, it's pretty similar story. I think in low ranks we can take a look at like gold, silver, stuff like that. She was doing okay. I guess, Yuumi creeping up to a 50% win rate in gold, I guess, is too much for Riot to handle. They see it coming back and they're getting worried. So they've hit Yuumi a couple of times over the last couple of weeks. And honestly, I just don't understand it. I think there are so many other champions that could be nerfed, but I think that they're very preemptively scared of Yuumi coming back. So I get where they're coming from, right? I wanted to preface that with we understand where they're coming from and that we don't like the champion and that its design is crazy. But, I mean, really, what is the justification for nerfing a champion that's just not doing well? And Yuumi has some fundamental problems when you play her in solo queue with random people. You cannot ward on this champion like at all. It's so hard to ward. Nobody ever takes you to where you need to go to ward, unless you're in a coordinated team and you can communicate to them to do that. And even then, it doesn't happen a lot, frankly. And you're definitely not jumping out to go try to ward on your own. That's way too scary most of the time. I mean, you have to sometimes, but so this champion fundamentally gets like a worse ward score and provides less vision to, her team than any other champion in support. And that already has a huge negative impact as well. So, but they're taking her healing down per hit, and she has, I believe, 5 shots of her ult. So it's 5 healing, then 10 healing, then 15 healing off of each part of the ult. And so this would be 25, 50, and 5 times 15 is, 75? So that's pretty significant, especially when you keep in mind that, Yuumi is a champion like all enchanters is going to go Moonstone. So that healing is also going to be increased by another, 35%. And when that healing is increased by another 35%, you're not only losing, let's say 50 healing, but you're also losing 35% of that 50, which would be half of 35, which is like 17.5. So you're losing 50, but you're also losing 17.5 on Moonstone because of that. More if you have even more healing and shielding power with other items, right? So nerfing base healing is actually kind of strong because when you take away 20 healing, we could talk about this even with the Senna change up there that was minus 10 healing on her Q if she has 100 ability power. When you take away 10 healing or 20 healing from an enchanter, you're not taking away 10 healing or 20 healing. If they had, 40% healing and shielding power, then rather than it being 20, it would be like nearly 30. And then they get that multiplied by 35% again with Moonstone, so then you're losing that. So when you take away healing and shielding flat amounts, it's not the flat amount that you're taking away. You're actually taking away much more healing than that. So that's kind of interesting to think about from a balance perspective. Items, we've completed a pass of AP itemization this patch, which has resulted in bringing down overperformers, buffing up lower performers, and reshaping a few items toward new user bases. I think this is great. So I've been saying that, we need to see buffs to mid lane and AD carry itemization, in my opinion. And we were talking about nerfing jungle and how difficult it is to nerf jungle. The power level is so strong in that role, but you can't really nerf the role in a way that takes power away from it without buffing buffing ganking junglers and just making a ganking meta come back, which laners hate even more. So it's a difficult spot to be in. But one of the ways that they can deal with it is, and this was the best idea that somebody had, is to just buff the other roles rather than taking power away from jungle. If jungle's in a good state for what the role is, it's not, the stats or the numbers or the way the camps are or anything like that that's making jungle powerful. It's just the role being the way that it is. It's just the innate power in a role that can have influence over so many fights and skirmishes and lanes in the game. So because of that, you can't really target jungle directly. You should just buff other roles then. And I think that that's the correct approach. In fact, I think in general, when it comes to League, buffing is a much better way, like giving people more power, and them feeling stronger and having a little bit more agency through that, as opposed to nerfing, is often actually a good way to go, from a balance perspective, from my opinion. Okay, so we have Bloodletter's Curse, which is getting 5 ability power and 50 health for free. And the magic resist shred per stack is going from 5% to 7.5%, but the maximum shred is unchained, so you just need less stacks. So really nice, helpful buffs to that item there. Crypt Bloom is going from 60 to 75 ability power, and the life from death heal is going actually down a little bit. It's losing 5% of its AP ratio, but this is kind of nice because we have a lot of healing in the game, and I'd like to see some of it come out. The recipe is changing from Blighting Jewel, Fiendish Codex, and 900 gold to Blighting Jewel, Fiendish Codex, and Fiendish Codex, which is 900 gold. So you don't have to sit waiting for this 900 gold. So this is obviously a much nicer build path because of that. But then the item's also going to cost 200 more gold, which is going to up the cost total. Looks like 150. So okay, so the total cost is going up 150, but the combined cost is going up 200 here. Interesting. How does that even work? Let me think about this here. So they had 900 gold. Isn't Fiendish Codex just 900 gold? So shouldn't this have just been even? But then they went up 150, but somehow this went up 200. I feel like the math is not mathing there, but maybe I'm not thinking about it correctly. Something sounds weird about that. Because if the total cost is going up 150, the 900 gold went to the Fiendish Codex, so you're adding 200 gold to the combined cost, but then you have to add 200 gold to the total cost. Oh, no, you don't. Because if there was already... Oh, no, you do. Yeah, I don't know. The math's not mathing. Something happened there. We can probably look it up and see what's actually going on with the item. Let's see. It says that the completion cost is 200 instead of 150. Oh, it's because Fiendish Codex is 850 gold, not 900 gold. It used to be 900 gold. That's my mistake. My math's not mathing. Hextech Rocket Belt is going from 60 to 70, so plus 10 ability power, but it's losing 50 health, and it's getting 5 ability haste, and the build path is going from Alternator, Kindle Gem 700, to Alternator, Fiendish Codex, and a Ruby Crystal, then 300 gold. So again, another better build path here. And the total gold cost is going up by 50. Updated cast indicator to more accurately represent bolt angles. So far, I think this is a buff to Bloodletter's Curse. Obviously, most of these are buffs. I'm really glad that they're increasing the power of AP itemization. This is a buff to Rocket Belt. I think losing 50 health isn't that big of a deal, and being able to get some extra damage and ability haste is really nice. Better build path is really nice. Only 50 more gold, not that big of a deal. Crypt Bloom. This one's a little bit more debatable because one of the things we've got to keep in mind with itemization is that if we can take an extra, when the cost goes up like 150 and what we're getting for it is just more ability power, well, even if that's cost efficient, which it really is, right? We would normally be paying 300, I think, for 15 ability power. Let me check if that's right. Ability power is about 20 per. So yeah, normally we'd be paying 300 for that much ability power. We're only paying 150, but that's because they were just buffing the item, right? So the thing that you have to think about is basically if I were to go and spend, 150 gold on AP to go into my next item, there's a huge advantage there from doing that because now you're 150, 200, 300 gold or whatever closer towards completing your next item. So if an item is just giving you basic stats, it's just giving you more AD, more health, more AP, and you could just get that from your next item. Unless you're at 6 items, you don't want the item to be more expensive and give you more stuff. You just want to be moving on to your next item. So when you see a change, sure, if it was giving you like a lot of stuff for free, and to be fair, this does, right? It gives you 150 gold worth of ability power for free. So that's very nice. But you're also losing some of your healing on the item. and it is delaying it. I think it's a buff to the item overall, but it's not a huge buff. It's very minor, because you'd rather put this 150 gold towards a next item if all you're getting out of it is AP. Horizon Focus ability power going from 75 to 110, but the Hypershot damage amp has been removed. And the recipe is going from Fiendish Codex, Amplifying Tome, 600 gold, to Fiendish Codex, Blasting Wand instead of Amp Tome, so that you're utilizing more of this leftover gold, and then only a combined cost of 350. Total cost is going up by 200 though. I have a hard time saying on this one. I don't know a whole lot about how much damage Hypershot did. We could probably look it up, right? So let's take a look really quickly. Horizon Focus. Hypershot no longer applies a debuff that applies damage dealt to revealed enemies by 10%. Amplifies damage dealt to revealed enemies by 10% for 6 seconds. Okay, so let's say that you do, during that 6-second time period, reduced to 3 seconds when applied via focus. So let's say that you did, like, I don't know, 500 damage. You do an extra 50. We're getting how much here? We're getting an extra 35. Oh, I think this is doing way more damage. I think 35 ability power, in that scenario, and 500 is a lot, right? 500 is like 25% of somebody's HP. There are going to be situations, of course, where you do more than that, but I don't know. I think having an extra, on a mage, right, that's got AP ratios across multiple abilities, having 35 extra ability power is going to represent probably, on average, maybe 35 damage per ability or something like that. So you could easily be looking at, an extra 90, 100, maybe even up to 200 damage. Of course, it's all situational. All depends on how many casts you get, right, versus how much damage you were going to deal while that 6 seconds was going on. So it's all very situational. But I think on average, actually, 35 ability power is going to give you a lot more damage than 10% increased damage for, or amplified damage for a few seconds. So I think that this ends up being a pretty big buff. But again, it's 200 gold more expensive. It has a bit better build path as well, which is nice. It ends up being a little bit more expensive, though, which, as we said, boom, you just go 200 gold into your ability power for your next item, and that can be beneficial because then you get its active or passive much faster. Liandry's Torment. So it's a slight buff, but nothing major. Liandry's Torment, 70 ability power to 60. Liandry's is one of the items I think that's been overperforming. You see, like, every AP champion has to go like Liandry's, and, in these type of items, the burn items have been really overbuilt, I think, on champions that shouldn't necessarily be building them. Lichbane ability power is going from 115 to 100. And this is a great example, I think, actually, of the opposite of, or like similar to what we were talking about before, but the opposite to the changes we've seen on those other items where they're getting more AP, but they're getting more expensive. Lichbane is this item that you just want for the extra damage that you get from, your big Sheen proc on Lichbane if you're, the type of mage that's using those auto attacks. And so being able to get the item 300 gold cheaper and then move into the other parts of your build that you want 300 gold faster is really, really beneficial. And sure, you lose 15 ability power, but you're not losing any gold value because 15 ability power is worth 300 gold. So you just get probably a better build path here for free, and you get access to the item 300 gold faster, and now you're 300 gold faster towards your next item as well. It's just really nice because you'd rather have Lichbane's active, or I guess it's a passive. You'd rather have Lichbane's passive effect and then move into your next item way quicker than, just have a stat stick with more ability power on it. So this is a great change. It's a big buff to the item. Sheen, Aether Wisp, Needlessly Large Rod, Sheen, Aether Wisp, Blasting Wand, and 250 gold. So, this is a nice change. Here, because Blasting Wand's easier to get to a lot of the time than Needlessly Large Rod because of how expensive this component is. And then obviously that was necessary because of the cost reduction anyways. Ludin's Companion, total gold cost is just going down 100. And the tooltip now shows the maximum single target damage, so quality of life. Nice, you know. Malignance gets 5 ability power for free. Nice. Morello's goes down 100 gold. Nice. Nasher's Tooth goes down 100 gold. Deathcap goes down 100 gold. Seraph's Embrace Lifeline Shield is going from 200 flat plus 20% of current mana to 18% of maximum mana. So, I mean, you have to run a lot of numbers here because it's quite complicated. Obviously, 18% of max mana is a lot bigger than 20% of current mana, especially by the time that the shield goes off, because the shield activates when you're, you know, like low, I think like 35% HP or something like that, right? So by the time you've gotten low, especially if you've done a good job, you've probably dumped a massive amount of your mana while fighting. And so if you've dumped a massive amount of your mana, you're not getting a very big shield, which is kind of counterintuitive. Now, because they're taking the 200 flat away, though, obviously it's hard to tell whether it's bigger or smaller, and they didn't put any notes on it here. I would say that Seraphs has been overperforming. Actually, they mentioned it in the first thing. Let's see what they said. Notable updates include Seraph's Embrace, where it'll be often stronger for mana-hungry champions like Cassiopeia and Kassadin, who will appreciate a more reliable shield. They're making it stronger. I think that that's crazy. I actually think Seraphs is one of the better AP items when you see Sona abusing this item and Seraphine so that they're very hard to kill, basically unkillable. I think that that feels really bad. I was hoping and expecting actually to see that it would be stronger for champions like Kassadin and, what did they say, Cassiopeia or whatever, and weaker. I was hoping to see weaker for Sona and Seraphine and stuff, but it looks like it's not. It's just stronger overall. So that's not ideal, but you know, whatever. Storm Surge total cost 2,900 to 2,800, so you know, minus 100 there. And then movement speed is going up to 6% from 4%, so that's nice as well. But the gold on preemptive takedown has been removed, and the movement speed that you get on Squall has also been removed. It's an okay change, maybe net power negative by a tiny bit, but pretty neutral overall. Okay, and then for runes, they're changing Unsealed Spellbook. It's mostly been absent from the game, true, like just nobody wants to figure out how it works, frankly. And it's, you know, it can be a fun, interesting rune, but I don't think that it really attracts anyone. And part of the problem is that runes and keystones and stuff really feel like they're supposed to fit your champion well specifically. And Unsealed Spellbook is just a catch-all generic one that doesn't almost belong with the set of keystone runes that exist. But, you know, it allows some interesting things. So what they're doing is they're buffing it up to create interest in it. And also, obviously, it does make it stronger. Base recharge cooldown is going from 5 minutes to 4 minutes, and the recharge cooldown at maximum swaps is going from 2.5 minutes to 1.5 minutes. So you're going to get to swap more often. And, you know, you'll also be able to swap much more frequently later on once you've, you know, gone through your progression of swaps. So that's kind of interesting. Definitely should think about it actually on Braum, since, as I've been saying, I think Braum's keystones have been, they're fine, but they're less than ideal, right? Like you have Guardian or Hail of Blades, and neither of them really fit Braum that well in the way that other keystones fit other champions really nicely. They're not terrible, but they're not great. Mythic Shop content updates, stuff like that, quality of life changes, bug fixes, skin updates, and here are the skins for the patch. Again, they've only released 3 skins for this patch. I've been talking about this since this is their moneymaker. I really think that they need to hire more people for the skins team if this is the number of skins that they can produce. I know people have been critical of the skins they've been putting out, and so they've been trying to make higher quality skins now. They've kind of shifted towards, okay, let's make sure they're really good quality. But it doesn't make sense to me from a business perspective, and maybe they know internally, that you're averaging like 4 or 5 skins a patch. You're dropping all these patches where there are literally like 3 skins. And sometimes the patches where you do have 5 skins, one of them's the honor skin or the end of the split skin that everyone's getting for free. And it seems to me like they would make more money if they were putting out more than 3 skins a patch. Am I crazy for saying that? It just seems to me like they would make more money if they did that. So when the only department that's making you money is the skins department, and obviously they're probably one of the better departments. I think they actually do a pretty decent job a lot of times with skins. The artwork in this game is pretty incredible. I think that we can all agree that the artistic side of Riot is probably the best side, whether it's the music or the art tends to be the best. So it seems to me like they would make more money if they're putting out like 5 or 6 or 7 skins a patch rather than 3. It's not like you're going to get overlap. Like, people aren't going to be, if you put out 7 skins for 7 different champions, it's not like people are going to be buying, I bought High Noon Yorick, so I'm not going to buy the Rise skin. I mean, maybe I don't understand casual players and their skin purchasing decisions, and so maybe, again, Riot understands something that I don't on this, but it's more like, I play Rise and this is a really nice skin, so I'm going to get it. Or it's like, wow, this skin is so good, I don't even play the champion, but I want to have it. Those are kind of the decisions that happen there. And so if there are more champions to choose from, I don't see why, that would be a bad thing. And even if you were releasing 7 skins or 8 skins a patch, I mean, with the 170 champions, you're still going to take, months before you get to doing the same champion again. So it's not like if you bought a skin 3 months ago, you're going to say, well, hold up, I just bought one for that champion. It's too soon. So I don't think that would even slow people down that much. It just seems to me like if you have thousands of people working, how can you only release 3 skins a patch? It doesn't seem like it makes any sense to me. That's all I'm saying. With that being said, you guys have a wonderful day. Good luck in the solo queue. Enjoy. And have a good patch. See ya.